Have you ever had one of those light bulb moments where everything just seems to click? I'm talking about one of those moments that you're just going through your day, doing things that you normally do, and then bam, you're hit with this realization that there's actually a purpose for what you're doing. A purpose more than just getting things done just to get them done, but a purpose that makes you feel motivated and excited about the things that you're doing. And then there's the other side of it. But instead of doing it the way that you knew it needed to be done, you tried to think of some shortcuts to make it easier and faster. Chances are that because you decided to take shortcuts, it didn't get done the right way and you had to start all over. Or in some instances, you might put all your focus on the shortcuts rather than the thing itself. But then either way, it was probably actually way more complex and ended up taking much more time than it would have in the first place. So those light bulb moments where everything clicks and you get motivated and you get excited, those are the moments when you're hit with the big picture. When you realize why and how the little things are all piecing together to serve that big picture, how they're all serving a bigger purpose. Today, we're looking deeper into why Jesus said some of the things that he said. We're wrapping up with the third and final talk of this series that we're calling A Blessed New Year, taking some lessons that Jesus taught his followers and discovering what it means for us to be blessed in 2021. Here we go. Hey, if we haven't met yet, my name is Lucas. I'm a youth minister here at Firehouse, and I can't tell you how excited I am that you're joining in today. So for the past couple weeks, we've been looking at the book of Matthew in the Bible, specifically chapter 5, going through the first part of what's known as Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. This is where Jesus is teaching this huge crowd of people and gives them a list of things that he says makes people blessed, not to be confused with the word blessed, because we found out that these two words are actually very different when they're translated from the original text. We learned that to be blessed is describing somebody as being oh so happy or living a life of happiness and contentment. The first week, we talked about attitude, how in the first part of his list, Jesus describes that what makes us blessed is living with the right attitude. The right attitude about who we are in relation to God, about who we are in relation to the world, and about who we are in relation to each other. And then last week, we talked about action, how the second part of Jesus' list describes that blessedness happens as a result of our current actions lining up with God's plan. Today, let's look at why Jesus calls us to think and act in ways so that we may be called blessed. So picking up where we left off, the next verses really serve as a conclusion to that list. It's almost like an epilogue, and he's giving us the rundown of why he just listed out all these things. In these next statements, rather than talking about hypothetical individuals, like how he references those who are poor in spirit, or the people who are pure in heart, the people who are peacemakers, etc., he's now specifically addressing the specific group that he's preaching to. And he tells them that they, as individuals, are part of something much bigger than themselves. So let's take a look, starting at Matthew chapter 5, verse 13. Jesus says, "You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot." So Jesus says that we are the salt of the earth. This analogy is kind of odd, isn't it? Quite honestly, I get a bit confused anytime someone compares me to a type of seasoning. But there's something about the Bible that we need to know and remember as we read it, and that is not everything that was written 2,000 years ago necessarily has the same meaning to us today as it did to the people who first read it back then. Jesus was speaking in ways that would have been relevant to the people who were listening at that time. So to better understand what he was saying, we need to try and understand how people back then would have interpreted it. So in efforts to try and figure out what he was saying, I went and asked my wise friend, Google. One of the things that Google told me was that salt was really important in those days. It was often used as a preservative, and it helped slow the decay of food. So I think one way to interpret this metaphor is that to be the salt of the earth is to preserve and protect the world from decay, to affect the world in the ways of Jesus, to slow the decay that's being caused by sin. Here's another thing I learned about salt. It's that salt was seen as different from everything around it. The texture, the taste, it was different from everything else, but that made it valuable. So in a way, I think Jesus here may have been saying that in order for his disciples to carry value in the world among everything and everyone, that they were to be different from the world around them. Let's look at verse 14. Jesus continues, and then he says to the crowd, "You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house." So here's the thing about light. Light cannot be ignored. I mean, why else would they make blackout curtains for your bedroom so the sun doesn't wake you up when you're trying to sleep in until 2 p.m.? Light can't be ignored, right? People notice light. Light draws attention. Are you with me? Jesus wants his disciples to be an example to the world, to be noticed, to draw attention. These two metaphors were said right after he taught us what it means to be blessed. He's saying that if we live in the ways that he teaches, then we will be blessed and people will notice. And then I love how Jesus says that a city built up on a hill can't be hidden, that your light can't be hidden. If you put a bowl over a flame, then what's going to happen? The flame is going to go out, right? So I think Jesus might be saying that there's no middle ground, that you're either fully ignited or that your light is going to go out. What do you think? Okay, now here's the final verse of this section of Jesus' Sermon on the Mount that we've been digging into for the past few weeks. In verse 16, Jesus says, "In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." When it comes down to it, it's not easy to live a life of righteousness, especially when you think that you found a shortcut to something that you think might bring you happiness. It's difficult to be a peacemaker in a world that often seems so divided. It's hard to live a life of purity, especially in moments when everyone else seems just fine with the things that might actually be pretty sinful. And sometimes the most popular people actually turn out to be pretty self-centered people. It's going to be hard to be the person who stays humble and patient and meek. But here's the thing. If people see that the followers of Jesus are humble, that they are pure in spirit, that they are merciful, and when they see that the followers of Jesus are also the people who are the most content and oh so happy in their lives, people will be curious. They'll want to know more about that light that's shining through you. They'll want to know how they can live that kind of life, a life of light and love and blessedness. So my point is, blessedness is not just about our own benefit or our own happiness. When we live with the right attitude, when our actions line up with God's plan, the world witnesses this and begins to share in this life of light and love. And then ultimately, God is glorified. As we were saying, living in this way that Jesus has called us is not easy. It's very specific, and we cannot take shortcuts. So I hope that this may be one of those light bulb moments where everything clicks for you, where you realize that there's a reason that we do the things that we do, that there's a bigger picture, that there's a bigger purpose to live for. I don't know about you, but once I learn that I'm part of something bigger than myself, that's when I'm most motivated, and that's when I'm most excited. Today I pray that we may live for this bigger purpose, that we may live in the ways that Christ has taught us here, so that you and I, and so this world may be blessed, and ultimately that God may be glorified.